Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you, everyone who is tuning in for this excellent opportunity to once again reconnect with Sean O'Connell post all the craziness that's happened with Snyder Cut in recent months, I guess. Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yes. It's been busy.
it's been very busy. So, Sean, thank you for being here again. We have a date for your book. We have it pre-ordered. I have it pre-ordered. A lot of people have it pre-ordered. But we have some fan questions today that we're going to dive into. But first, for those who may not know what we're talking about, tell us a little bit about the project you've been working on.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I gotta say, this is amazing. Like, your animation was really, really cool, and just the fact that you're putting this virtual film fest together at a time when a lot of us are still, sheltering in place and stuck. This is amazing. I'm glad that you have this opportunity to pour your creative juices into something like this. Really, really cool, and I'm proud of you for putting this on.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So the book is called "Release the Snyder Cut," and my wife will tell you that the majority of my wardrobe is made up of Snyder Cut T-shirts. A lot of them, due to the geniuses over at Ink to the People, and those designs sort of go to the AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, an incredible fundraiser that's tied to the Snyder Cup movement. So for 3 years, essentially ever since 2017, when the theatrical cut of the Justice League movie was released, and diehard fans who had been patiently waiting to see Zack Snyder's vision of that team realized, they came on board with Man of Steel, and they followed it through Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. They got the old bait and switch, which was, hey, you're going to get Zack's vision, but instead you got Joss Whedon's. And, we've now come to realize over the course of this 3 years that it was as much as 90% of the film was reshot. Zack, this whole time, has been saying that he's had a vision or a version of his vision that he was ready to share with fans. And so they adopted the mantle, released the Snyder Cut, used that hashtag, and then just fought tooth and nail daily for 3 years. And so I kind of wanted to get their story and put it together into a book, because I've just learned so many amazing things about the people who were involved in the movement, and even just documenting their accomplishments over the course of the past 3 years has been pretty monumental. And then, the joke you make at the beginning of this of how much has changed over the past couple of months, to have this book finished and almost waiting to go to press right at the time when on May 20th, he turns around and decides he's going to announce that it's coming, is timing and luck that I will truly never be able to wrap my brain around how that worked out in such a seamless way, to then have the ability to go back, rework the ending, get some more updated interviews, including getting Zack to come and speak for the book. And so to have this as a recap of everything that happened over the past 3 years, it's been kismet, just dumb luck. And I was at the right place at the right time.
That's incredible. Sean, what makes this movement, the Snyder Cut movement, different than, I think, how it's been portrayed a lot is just fans, whining and crying for what they want and suddenly getting what they want? Why is this different?
Well, I think a lot of times when fans sort of whine and cry, quote unquote, which I don't think that's fair, but there are some fan bases that make a lot of noise for something that they want. But then there's constructive criticism or constructive rallying behind a cause. The quote unquote whining and crying, I think that tends to be a flash in the pan. It might be pretty passionate for a couple of days, maybe even a few weeks, as a fan base sort of says, like, give us what we think we are entitled to. But then those people who really don't, they're not invested in a movement quite as much, they go off and find something else that will distract them, kind of thing. Another shiny bauble that will get their attentions. The Snyder Cut movement truly believed wholeheartedly in the things that they were fighting for. And for each person in the movement, it might have been something different. Some people will tell you that it was artistic integrity and getting Zack's vision restored. And those people almost will go the extra mile to say all of the people who put their time into the movie, who dedicated their time and energy to Zack's vision, they deserve to be rewarded. For a lot of other people, they made the connection to the charitable efforts of the AFSP for various reasons, that suicide prevention has been really important to them, and they wanted to see that flourish. For a lot of people, it's been both of those things. And for some, it's truly just they love the DC universe. They have deep connections to these characters, whether it be Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and they want to see them realized in a format that's proper. And the theatrical cut was an insult to them. So, I think the fact that they are as passionate as they are but that they were able to find new ways to both sustain their momentum in keeping the fight to get the Snyder Cut released, but find ways to not just raise awareness for their cause, but to benefit other causes in the process is what really helps them stand apart and sort of shuck that dismissal of toxic fandom that sometimes gets thrown at them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I 100% agree with everything you just said. So Sean, you weren't an author prior to this. I mean, I know that you've done writing, you have an interest obviously in the fandom, in film. And I guess I know the answer to this because I asked you last time, but I think it might be interesting to dive into again. What made you just say, I'm going to write a book about this? The focus I see was, wanting to tell the story and all that, but what turned you to a book?
I mean, I get fascinated by reporting on any of these stories that become trends. And we see, I'm the managing director of a website called Cinema Blend. And we do keep track of these stories as they develop, but very few of them have the type of legs that this story truly had. Once you get to the root of whatever the cause of a story is, it sort of plays itself out. And there's very few stories that I've come across that have had the layers and the meat on the bone to sustain putting together into a book. There's been plenty of people who have been able to find really interesting nonfiction stories that they have researched and put together on the page, but I've never really been that kind of person. But once I laid out the different facets of the Snyder Cut story that were interesting to me, I realized, there is enough here, even on a skeletal frame, to be like, once I talk about everything that happened to Zack, through the DCEU. Once I start to describe how the studio shifted gears. I was lucky enough to go to the set of Justice League back in 2016 when it was still Zack's movie. So I had research and audio and quotes from that I went back and listened to again in the early days of this and heard a lot of things that they were saying at the time that I was like, that's all really interesting. Like you start to pull information from all different places and you start to apply it to the bigger story. And you think like, there is a lot here. And that was before I even started talking to the people in the movement, like doing interviews with them and getting their insights into it. The more that they weighed in, the more I realized this is a much bigger story that I really do want to tell. And honestly, you've heard people who've written books say this. It just stays with you. It becomes a point where any downtime you have, you want to kind of sit down and keep chipping away at it. Sure. Whenever someone agrees to be interviewed, or I did a lot of these interviews via email because it was just easier. I could send the people the questions. They would have a lot of time to think about what they wanted to respond. Selfishly, from a writer standpoint, it's easier to just copy and paste people's responses than transcribing a lot of stuff. That's a little note for people who are thinking about doing a book. Do email interviews. It's really easy, or it's easier. But I just had such a blast shaping the story. But the funny thing about the Snyder Cut book has been that even though it's a book, it has felt like a breaking news story the entire time that I worked on it, because significant things kept happening over the course of the journey that even while I was telling the history of who these people are and how they even got to the point of having a Snyder Cut version to fight for, that was like the front half of the book. The back half of the book was still dealing with things that were consistently happening, whether it be this trending event on social media on November 17th that got the attention of Warner Brothers, whether it be them doing the Times Square billboard during the New York Comic-Con, where the movement actually raised money internally to pay for the rental of a digital billboard in Times Square, like telling people, release the Snyder Cut. Like all these things kept happening. And I was like, well, that's another chapter in the book. Like I always remember when Subway agreed to donate all those sandwiches. So Subway sandwiches decided that they got asked by a member of the Snyder Cut family, like, hey, how many retweets in order for you to donate there was a cause too. And I forget what it was. Feed America, it might've been, which
maybe.
I think might be,
I'm trying to remember.
I think the Feed America is Ben Affleck's cause, or one of the causes that Ben gets behind. And so a member of the Snyder Cut family hit up Subway, and Subway was like, yeah, okay, if you can do this amount in X amount of hours, then we'll make the donation. And of course, the Snyder Cut movement did it in like record time. They did it in minutes, essentially, because they're just, anytime you give them a challenge like that, they're just going to rise up and get it done. And then Subway, from that point on, whoever the social media manager over there is, they're genius because they just would tweet, release the Snyder Cut. And, they were having a lot of fun with it. They played along with it. And I remember a friend of mine texting me because he knew I was deep into the book. And he was like, "Are you going to have to write a chapter about Subway?" And I was like, "I guess I am." Because we have to figure it out.
I remember on a Fandom Day, Subway tweeted or something or commented, and I saw your retweet of it saying, "You want to learn what this is all about?" Pre-order.
Well, if you didn't know, like, it's got to look weird to be like, why is Subway tweeting release the Snyder Cut? That's so funny. It's such an unusual story. There's so many unusual elements to this story that even if you tell like one of them, people are like, "What? Oh, wait, what happened?" Like, to me, the Henry Cavill, digital mustache to me is almost a story that could earn its own book kind of thing to get to the heart of what honestly happened. To me, that's a chapter in the book. Yeah, that's a chapter. It's called Mustache Gate, and it gets deep into the like how this happened and why it happened and Henry's reaction to it all. And that was a fun one to put together.
That's incredible. So I'm going to start this off with a joke because I have been holding this and I don't know, but you became Ray Fisher's best friend during Justice Con when he mentioned your name and, social media for you exploded.
Oh my God.
But one of the questions on a serious note that we got I got a lot when we posted the other day about you doing this, was there anything apparent in your research or when you were on set or anything like that, would have given you any sort of insight or a hint of the accusations that Ray Fisher has levied in the current Warner Brothers investigation? Because like you said, that's a whole nother aspect, right? Like this is a story that just keeps growing. And now this is a whole different turn for the Snyder Cut.
It really is. And so yes, a number of things that came up, and it's hard because two things in terms of my book. One, that wasn't really a story that I wanted to tell in this book. Sure. I wanted this book to really be a celebration of the movement and what they achieved. But it was hard not to recognize what had happened with, and when I say you connect a lot of the dots as you talk to the people who worked on Justice League and who wanted to talk and who specifically didn't want to talk, right? Like, it's weird to me that Joss personally has never talked about his contributions to the movie. Like, here he's brought on board to do a Justice League film and he's never done a single interview for it. And I almost would think that he'd want to, if he was really proud of the work he did, and if there wasn't anything underhanded, he would almost take the time to he would pick a very friendly media source that he trusts. And he would say, "Let's do a profile on my work with Justice League to get my side of the story out there." And he's never done that. And I found that to be weird always, to the point where there was one point in researching this and getting deep into the research of it where I found one article that was like, Joss Whedon talks about Justice League. And it was all these quotes about, "Hey, I tried my best. Things didn't work out the way that it was going to be." And I was like, finally, it's just some insight from this guy. And it turns out it was on a website. I'm not going to mention which one it is, because I almost don't remember which one it is. But it was an April Fool's joke. It was an April Fool's joke that they laid it out. And if you clicked on the source link of it was like Joss Whedon stood up at a comic book convention in Denver over the weekend and was asked by a fan about the Snyder Cut. And he finally opened up about it. And I'm reading the quotes in the thing and I'm like, this is gold. Like, how come people aren't talking about this? And then I clicked on the link of the source and it went to the freaking Rick Astley Rickroll thing. And I was like, you pieces of, for doing an April Fool's joke. But then I was like, but that's really telling that this is the only thing that's ever been out there is something that he said. So Whenever people are asking me, and believe me, they ask me a lot, like, how much of this is in the book? It's in the book, but it's really only stuff that I could report, that I could get people to source. And until Zack was able to release his cut, people like Ray and people who worked very closely with Zack weren't willing to talk. They didn't want their version out there. So now that story is breaking, I've had a lot of people say to me, like, "Oh, you're going to do a sequel to the book? Like, you're going to write a follow-up?" And I was always like, no, that's someone else's story to tell. But there's enough stuff happening that I'm like, maybe I am gonna follow this and see what else is going on and get to the heart of what happened. But that isn't what I wanted to do with this book. But that's not to say I don't want to do it for a separate book that is going to get into a lot of this other stuff that's happening.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's just another strange chapter, author pun, strange chapter in what is going on with this film. And I don't think that leading up to Justice League, at least before Zack departed, that anyone would have ever thought that in 2020 we'd still be talking about the production of the film.
No, but I will also say, not to keep teasing the book, but there are, like Zack did during my interview with him, open up about his reasons for leaving. And yes, it's of course everything that happened with Autumn, but he has other reasons and he lays them out. And so that was a really exciting moment to get that from him, because I know he's been waiting for the opportunity to talk about this. That's great. And I wanted it in there because I think it really captures where he was at that stage in May, when he was able to finally, triumph and get his version out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we said earlier, there's just so much more to this story than simply fans wanting a film to be different, so to speak. But on that note, one of the things that we see online a lot is it's a decisive issue when it comes to the Snyder Cup movement and whether or not fans should, quote unquote, have the power to push a studio to get what they want, so to speak. And one of the questions that was submitted, it put it pretty funny in my eyes, but why must all of the haters attempt to take away our joy? You mentioned you were ready to talk about that, so go for it.
Well, I mean, the line I've been using when I sort of get approached by that is the classic Joker. No, I'm sorry. Well, a Dark Knight line that's actually Alfred, which is simply, some people like to watch the world burn. There's people who like to stir the pot just to stir the pot, and they're not invested one way or the other. And they do things to get the fan base riled up, So they'll say provocative things to push the buttons of the members of the fan base. And I would like them to take the high road and to ignore that. But listen, I even get swept up in it when something gets said and I'm like, ooh, I want to respond to this right now. Like,
oh, me too. Don't worry.
Yeah. And you shouldn't. I know you shouldn't. And even Ray Porter and Ray Fisher have said, like, don't feed the trolls. Do not feed the trolls. There are just trolls out there that either have it out. Listen, they may have it out for Zack. They may legitimately not like his movies. They may legitimately want his Justice League to fail. I think there's a whole component of people who don't have a dog in this fight at all and just want to get in and start a flame war. They don't care about Zack. They don't care about the DCEU. They're just bored on social media. And it's really easy to drop a grenade into the middle of a Snyder Cut conversation and just get the fan base riled up. I would advise them to ignore it. It's really hard to do. And I'll tell you, even talking to Zack about this, when I asked Zack specifically, like, his response to the label of toxic fandom, he's ignored it for as long as he can and has taken the high road. But in our conversation, he let that side come out, where he was just like, here's what I would love to do, if given the opportunity. And so it's funny to see that even he gets annoyed by this. And it's hard to ignore. It's hard to, Zack is a punching bag for that faction. But I think that they don't care what the punching bag is. They just want a bag to punch.
They just want a punching bag.
Yeah, it could be something else next week, But the Snyder Cut movement, whenever you hear Zack get attacked or the movie get attacked or the movement get attacked, they don't forget it. They sink their teeth into it and go right after these people.
Well, and Zack even, I guess, on Fandom Day, responded to a tweet about the leaked trailer and caused a stir about that as well.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And that became fodder, even in my DMs, for people who were like, see, this is what Zack encourages. And so, and I was like, okay, yes, but also, you don't understand what this guy's been going through from the minute he started Man of Steel. He's been their dog to kick for all these different things they've disagreed with, and he's absorbed it for the better part of 7-8 years. And then, of course, has to get his Justice League movie taken away from him and for another 3 years. listen to this narrative that he can't control about it doesn't exist, it'll never get finished, it'd probably be bad anyway. If the studio honestly believed in it, don't you think that they would get behind it? Like all of these things that he had to listen to and ignore. And then once or twice he punches back at a journalist who commented on a leaked trailer. Like everyone overlooks that. They're like, okay, yeah, he shouldn't have commented on a leaked trailer, but Zack should. No. That conversation stops right there. You shouldn't comment on leaked material. That's it. End of story. That's the end of that conversation.
Yeah, it's a shame that it becomes that divisive, and sometimes I just want people to like, well, all the time, I want people to just allow people to like what they like. It's something that you face all the time as a movie fan, and putting reviews up here and there, that people just like want to go on the attack, and
oh yeah,
it drives me crazy. Like I may not love a film or may not even like it at all, but I'm glad that someone else does. More power to you. Like it's great for the filmmaker as well to connect with someone that he or she intended to connect with. And that's just part of it here that drives me crazy. And DC gets a bad rap for all that.
Well, I was going to say, ask Ryan Johnson or Kelly Marie Tran about Star Wars fandom.
Yeah. Star Wars, as a DC fan, I say Star Wars is a terror of a fandom, but I mean, DC is just as bad.
But it goes to show like that just every fandom has that side 100%. To it. It's just a matter of how bright do you want to put that spotlight on that side of it.
Yeah. Sean, tell us a little bit about what you're working on next, because it sounds like you have the author bug, and
yeah, I got bit hard by it. And it's very funny. I got interviewed by a friend of mine who asked, how did you make sure not to get overwhelmed by the post creativity blues? And he's right. Like when you get to the end of a project, you spend so much time working on it that when you don't have to work on it anymore, you are like, what am I going to do now? Right. And one of the fears that I had going through it, like I went from, I will never write a book, to just like, what can my next few books be? Because I enjoyed the process so much. So when I was pitching the Snyder Cut book around, I knew that wholeheartedly that was the book that I wanted to write. But I also I cooked up a couple other ideas. And so I have a few of them in the mix. And one of them that I'm putting together is more of a Spider-Man book. And it's tied specifically to the Spider-Man movies. But my angle kind of going into it, without giving the whole ball of wax away, is more like stories that didn't make it to the big screen. Whether it be unrealized scripts, sequels that were supposed to happen that didn't. It's going to take me through the Raimi films. It's going to take me through the Mark Webb films. It's going to get me into some of the chances to bring Spider-Man into the MCU before they connected with Civil War. But really told by the people who put those movies together. So I've been collecting a bunch of interviews so far with some really exciting people who have told me the inside scoop on that. And so far that's been a lot of fun to really put together too. But it's been more research intensive. And that's kind of the type of book that I needed to, like, I want to focus on movies that are in the past, because that Snyder Cut one, when I'm telling you that it really was like writing a giant breaking news story, that's how it felt like. And you were racing the clock constantly. So now it's been really fun to be like, okay, my next chapter coming up is, as an example, like David Koepp, after he wrote Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie, he kind of wrote out an outline for what his part 2 and part 3 would be. And I was able to speak to him in depth about that. And so I've spent like 2 weeks just working on this one chapter, and it's been really, what a treat. This has been really, really nice. So, so that's kind of in the direction that I'm heading. But at the same time, people have been asking me about a follow-up to the Snyder Cut book, and the more things happen and the more developments that shake out on that subject, I've absolutely kept tabs on that, and wouldn't be surprised if I'm sort of juggling both at the same time, which is daunting, but sounds like a lot of fun.
It does sound like a lot of fun, and more power to you. I mean, self-taught author in that sense, right? And
absolutely. And honestly, you have to be out here hustling in order to get these ideas made and done. And now it almost feels like I have a foot in the door and I don't want to take the foot out because I'm afraid it would close and never open again. So I'll ride this train for as long as I can, as long as people are interested in what I'm trying to write. And I'm still in that fear mindset of like, yes, I've written the Snyder Cut book, but none of you guys have read it yet. And I hope you like it. So we'll see.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. It shot up to #1 of pre-orders, didn't it, at one point?
That was ridiculous. Yes. Yes. On Amazon, for science fiction movie genre, it hit #1 for bestsellers. And then like 2 days later, it went on the UK Amazon and it hit #1 on that one also, which is astounding to me. And I can't say thank you enough to the fan base for supporting it.
People are excited for it. And why don't you tell them when it's coming out and where they can pre-order it?
Sure. So I have a date. It's February 15th, 2021. You could pre-order it now on every outlet where you can find books, whether it's my publishers have essentially said, send people to Amazon because that's the outlet that most people feel comfortable ordering from, but it's on Barnes and Noble. It's on Books A Million. My publisher is Applause Books. It's on their webpage too. And then they're backed by Rowan and Littlefield, which is the main publisher. They have a page on their book. It's been fun to see now. It's been rolling out to the different Amazons around the globe. It hit UK Amazon like a week after it went on US Amazon. I know it's on French Amazon, and I know that Italy and India is like waiting for it. Like I get DMs from people who are like in Italy and India, and they're like, "When can I order your book?" And that melts my brain. Like that's
awesome.
I don't know.
Such a cool thing to hear.
Yeah, it's great. It's so great. But that's Zack's fan base is global, and they are coming out of the woodwork to support everything attached to him, and that's blown me away to learn that much about how much passion there is out there for him and his films.
That's awesome. Well, listen, I definitely appreciate you jumping on again to talk about this. I know how passionate you are about it. I know, I'm certainly passionate about the subject. I can't wait to read the book, and you need to promise me that you're going to come on here to talk about Spider-Man a little bit more as you dive deeper.
Oh my God. I would love to. Thank you so much for the invitation. And thank you for having me on here today. This is great. I really appreciate this.
Of course. So February 15th is when the book releases. You can pre-order now wherever. There's a link to the Amazon pre-order for the US down below in the description. Sean,